I love road trips, but there are different types of road trippers. So in our family, we're the drive as long as you can for as far as you can every day until you get there kind of road trippers. Anybody with me on that? Just get there. Okay, a few of us. Okay. We have some friends who are kind of the exact opposite. They will not drive more than about 4, maybe 5, if they're pushing it, 4 or 5 hours in a day. And it's no matter where they're headed or how far they're going, they will not do it. In fact, they live in the Sacramento area, Sacramento, California, and it's about 6.5, 7 hour drive from their house to Disneyland, but it doesn't matter. That is a 2-day trip for them. They will stop in like Bakersfield and sleep and then go on the next day. But I love road trips. In fact, when I was growing up, there were a lot of kids in my family and not a lot of money. And so whenever we would still go on vacation in summertime, I grew up thinking vacation meant going on a road trip to a relative's house who lived in another state. Like that was vacation. And there was a lot of kids and we were kind of poor. And so we didn't have an AC in the car. And there were never any hotels. When my parents got tired, we'd just pull over and sleep in the car on the side of the road. And so it was brutal. And so we would often drive from like like the western part of Colorado all the way down to the Gulf Coast where in Texas, where my mom's family is from. And so when I was 6, my parents split up. And when they did, my mom took us on a vacation. And so we drove from Colorado all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And this trip, though, was a little bit special because, yes, we went and stayed with family like we always did, but we also spent a few days with some of my parents' friends, which was amazing because they had a lot more money than we did. And so they had a swimming pool and a trampoline and some dirt bikes, and they had this new electronic like device that nobody else that I'd ever met had at that time called a VCR. And so we could watch movies at their house instead of going to the theater. I mean, just imagine. And to top it off, they had the top-of-the-line video game console, the one that started it all, the Atari 2600. It looked just like that. And I think it came with Defender, when you bought it, or Missile Command or something like Asteroids. I don't know. It came with one of those. But I remember thinking when we were at their house, this is actually vacation. Like, forget, like, stupid board games at grandma's house. This is awesome. And obviously there was a lot going on in my little heart and mind at the time, given everything that was happening in my family. But that trip that summer to our friend's house, it left me completely unhappy about my life and where I lived and what I had available to me back at home. And I remember thinking for months afterwards, how amazing it was if we could just move and live where they live. Because in my mind, it wasn't just that their family had those things. It's that everybody that lived there had that stuff. They somehow lived in this magical land that was so much better than where I lived. And that land was called Texas. Has that ever happened to you, though? Like, not that you wanted to move to Texas, but that you were kind of waiting on or dreaming of some other time, some other place, believing that a better life is somewhere other than where you are right now. And maybe that's actually how you ended up in Idaho, is because you were somewhere else, and you were like, man, if we could just get to Idaho, we got to get out of this stupid Southern California stuff, and we got to go to Idaho. Or maybe that's why you're in the relationship that you're currently in. It actually happens to us way more than we'd like to admit. It happens in all kinds of ways. Because now you don't actually have to physically go to a place to get a glimpse of it, right? You don't have to tour that school or visit that church or research that job or drive through that neighborhood or travel to that city. You can just jump online and you can see how much more amazing it is for them over there doing that thing, living there, going those places than it is where you are. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to romanticize a life that you're not living? One of the things that's really interesting to me is that like more and more and more of us in our lives, we sort of live our lives half where we are and half sort of looking for and waiting on something better. We do it with our jobs, we do it with our cars and our homes and our neighborhoods and our cities. We do it with our kids' schools and we do it with churches. We do it in relationships, we even do it with our bodies. Our eyes are always on the horizon, looking for something better, thinking about the life we'd live and the person we'd be if we could just get somewhere better than here, if we could just be somewhere else other than right here, right now. And if you talk to us, we're not without our reasons and arguments for why. And some of them are like surface stuff, admittedly, like we'll admit that stuff. But a lot of them are deeper and seem almost profoundly spiritual. Because we say like, I'm just not at peace here. Or I just can't be happy. Or this city's just so screwed up. Or this state is just too liberal. Or this state is just too conservative. Or I just don't connect here. I'm not really getting anything out of this church, and so I need to go to that church. And I'm just not feeling really fed in my soul. And most of us live with what I'd call the Ariel syndrome. Everybody remember the Little Mermaid movie? That she was made for water, and she lives in this beautiful world that's perfect for her. And in fact, Sebastian is singing songs about it, trying to get her to see how perfect the world that she was made for and lives in is for her. But then we got to spend 90 minutes watching her be all dissatisfied and complain about her life, being sold that it's really about love, but it's not. She's just unhappy. You know, talking about out of the sea, wish I could be part of that world. But here's the thing. You and I sing that same song all the time about all kinds of things. I was reading this week, I actually read this post by this guy, and he said this. He said, unhappiness is not knowing what we want and killing ourselves to get it. And I thought, wow, that is so true and so powerful. And then I thought, actually, it's worse than that. And so I thought I would tweak it slightly. And I said this, believing that what I happen to want right now is actually what I need, and then killing myself to get it, that's what leads to a shallow, miserable, unhappy life. And so you and I, we just sing Ariel's song, I wish I could be, because we're convinced. If you just got to that job or that neighborhood or that group or that state or that city, or your kids went to that school, if you just went to that kind of church and they taught this way and this kind of music, then you'd really experience God. Then my kids would really grow. Then our family would really flourish. And then I'd learn all the things that would really make my faith come alive and be real. And honestly, admittedly, there are times and seasons in our lives where it is necessary for us to uproot some things from where we are and to go. The problem is that more and more and more of us, more often, we don't really actually put down roots at all, right where we are. We're like emotional, relational, and spiritual transients in our own life. These are just the friends we have right now. This is just the neighborhood we live in right now. This is just the church I go to right now. This is just the thing I'm a part of right now. And if it goes south or something happens or somebody's an idiot or I get something better comes along, I'm out of here. I'm going to go to the next thing. And while this might be more prevalent now, it isn't really a new problem. In fact, about 2,600 years ago, the people of God, the nation of Israel, they found themselves in this exact situation. So for them, where you lived was a big deal. Can you imagine? Land was a big deal. Like where you set up shop, where you put down roots was a big deal. And so Israel was the land that God had promised them when they were enslaved in Egypt. And it was perfect. It was designed by God specifically for them. They had escaped slavery and wandered through the wilderness to get there. And God led them every step of the way with all kinds of miracles and powerful things. And so for them, Israel, Jerusalem, that was where God's presence lived. It was the stuff of legend. In fact, when you go back and read it, you might have heard this when you read in the book of Genesis and Exodus. They described it as the land flowing with milk and honey, which doesn't do a lot for me. Because like I started thinking about it, like if it was the land like flowing with like chips and salsa, now we're talking, like yeah, that sounds like someplace I want to live. Or the land flowing with tacos and ice cream, where do I sign up for that? Like that's what I'm talking about. The point was though for them, it had everything that you could ever want in excess. It was the place that you wanted to be. And so they believed that living anywhere else was less than God's best and you absolutely should not settle anywhere else. The problem was life. The problem was that they had been conquered over and over and over again, and in this particular story, they were conquered by a massive empire, the Babylon Empire, the Babylonians, and a whole bunch of them, thousands and tens of thousands of them had been carried off and exiled into Babylon. Isn't it a bummer when life kind of stomps all over how you think things should go? And so all they could think about, all these hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Babylon, all they could think about was getting out of Babylon, going home. But what God ends up saying to them is something really profound, and it was not at all what they wanted to hear. And this is what he says to them in Jeremiah chapter 29. It says, "This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says to all of the captives that he has exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem." He says, "Build homes and plan to stay." No thanks, God. What else you got? Plant gardens and eat the food that they produce. Marry and have children, then find spouses for them so that you may have many grandchildren. Multiply. Don't shrink back. Don't dwindle away. Work for the peace and the prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. Have you ever looked at your life and how it was going and felt like God was just kind of asleep at the wheel? Like God, are you confused? Because this was not the plan. I thought you're the one that gave us Israel. Why am I here? Or like he's not listening, he's not paying attention. That's exactly how they were feeling. They're in Babylon thinking, okay, excuse me, any minute now, God's just gonna show up and he's gonna show these Babylonians who's boss, and we're gonna get out of here and we're gonna go back to the promised land. We're gonna go back to Israel. And they're just waiting and thinking and praying. And then God says, listen, I know that's what you want, but guess what? You ain't going nowhere. I want you to actually stay planted right where you are. And so they were hurt, and they were confused, and they were big mad, and they were offended. And God, how could you do this? But I want you to notice the description in verse 4. It starts out, it says, "This is what the Lord of heaven's armies says." Now, I don't know how many armies that heaven has, but I'm certain that they're bigger and stronger and more powerful than any earthly army that's ever existed. This is God's not so subtle way of saying, yes, of course I'm powerful enough to change your situation. Of course I'm big enough to come and move you, but I'm not going to. I actually have you right where I want you to be. You need to trust me on this, and you need to put down roots, and you need to stay put and stay planted. And that's exactly what he says, right? He says, build homes and plan to stay. Stop using your environment as an excuse for your life not being what you want it to be, and you not becoming who you could be. Stop using your circumstances and what's happened to you and the cards that you were dealt as an excuse for you to live a lesser life. But for them, they're going like, how? How do we do that? How do we stay planted here of all places? Well, I mean, this can't possibly be what God wants in my life. This is certainly not what I'm looking for. And even if it's not that bad, sometimes we're just like, look, it's fine for now, but surely there's something better. Surely God's got it. Surely I'm going to end up. Surely I'm looking around the corner. Surely I can move on. Now, obviously, we got all dramatic, and we feel like, when we're in a situation we don't like it's life or death, right? But none of us are ever going to face anything close to what the people in this story were facing. But that's what we do, right? We blame our restlessness and our dissatisfaction with our life on God. God, listen, if you just get with the program, right? Or even worse, our restlessness actually causes us to resist the very places that God gave us for flourishing. And God was going, look, the life that you want, it actually can happen right where you are. But you keep resisting it because you want to go somewhere else. But this is the place where I'm actually going to do something beautiful and powerful and life-changing for you. But you keep resisting it. And so we spend our time and our money and our energy chasing people and places and things that appear more exciting or fun, or somehow in all of our wisdom and insight, we pursue things that we think will be better for us. I don't know about you, but I'm embarrassed how easy it is for me to plant myself in places and environments that are just fleeting. How easy it is for me to stay planted somewhere that feeds sort of the surface level of my life. How about you? So the scriptures actually, God refers to this in the scriptures, in the New Testament especially, as our flesh. It says this in Galatians chapter 5, verse 16. It says, let the Holy Spirit guide your lives, then you won't fulfill the desires of the flesh. There's a whole bunch of verses like this in the New Testament. And part of what God's talking about when he talks about the flesh is certainly our sinful nature, our tendency towards brokenness and mess and hurt ourselves and separate ourselves from God and do the wrong thing. But it also encompasses just kind of that default part of us that's just kind of weak and easily corrupted and is always pulled, towards what's earthly and comfortable and lower and lesser and temporary and indulgent. And so I have found it's so much easier to stay connected to and planted in places that feed that part of my life instead of those places that feed my soul or my spirit. And ultimately, those places that would challenge and sometimes even confront that fleshly part of that lower, comfortable, messy part of my life. But here's what has been swirling around inside of me. And I hope that I can somehow infect you with it. That I'm tired of wasting time being planted in things that are just nice and entertaining or easy, but don't have a lot of spiritual value. And don't mistake what I'm saying. If you know me at all, man, I love life. But I want to, going into this year, I want to be planted in places and things that are going to ultimately call me to who God created me to be. That are going to call me to things that are going to result in some change. That's going to build my soul. That's going to grow and expand my spirit. That's going to change the dynamic in my marriage and in my family. It'll make me a better man and a better husband and a better father and leader and friend. I want to be planted in stuff that matters. Because I don't need any faith to stay planted in my bed on Saturday morning. That's pretty easy for me. But I do need some faith to get up out of bed at 7 o'clock when I need to get up to get ready to go to the men's group that meets at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning with men who encourage and sharpen me and make me better. I don't need God's help to scroll my phone and share hilarious memes with my friends. And if you're not somebody that I share memes with, your life is sad because I share the best ones. But I do need God's help in opening and spending time with him every day in the scriptures, in his word. It doesn't take a lot of faith for me to stand up on Sunday morning and talk about our church needs a building, let's grow, let's go do this thing. But I'll be honest, it takes a lot of faith for me to keep praying about it day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, for God to open that door. But your faith, your dreams, your prayers, all of us praying together, that's different. That changes things. What I've learned is that we're really good at detecting when something's missing from our lives, but we're really bad at diagnosing what it is. And so we will chase after all kinds of things because we can just feel it. Something's missing. There's just not that deep satisfaction, peace, connectedness in our soul, and so we're just constantly trying to grab it. It's got to be because, well, I thought if I got this job, or we had this much money, or we lived over there, or this house, or we got to that place that it would satisfy, but it just doesn't because we get there. And so instead of thinking, well, that's maybe not the right strategy, we just go, well, it must be the next biggest thing. And that's what God was saying to the people in Jeremiah. You don't need to go somewhere else to flourish. You don't need everything you think you need to flourish. What you need is to plant yourself in the good that's right where you're at. See, the truth is, no matter where you're at in your life right now, there are places and spaces that you're in and you're around that could change everything for you if you would just plant yourself in them. It's really easy for me to stay planted in a Netflix series. Binge like 5 episodes in. It's way harder to stay planted every day in God's presence. Have you ever done that thing where you're watching a Netflix show that you really like, and you're like 3 episodes in, then you fall asleep in the 4th episode, and you wake up and it's like the 6th or 7th episode, and the screen is paused, and you get that shaming sort of passive-aggressive message from Netflix that says this, "Are you still watching?" And you're like, "Why don't you shut up, Netflix?" Right? Netflix triggers that message when it detects a lack of interaction over a certain period of time. See, it's not just to see if you're still in the room, it's to see if you're still engaged. Because you can be in the room and not be engaged. Right? You can be in the room and be checked out. You can be in the room and not be leaned in. You can be in the room and not be planted. And so like Netflix this morning, if this is your church, I just want to ask you this morning, I want to pause at the beginning of this year and ask you, are you still here? Are you still engaged? Are you still growing? Are you planted? See, because the life that you're longing for, and whatever it is that you think is missing, whatever it is that's missing, it isn't about finding some different soil somewhere else. It's about you fostering deeper roots in your life right where you are. It was true in Jeremiah 2,600 years ago, and it's true of you and me. You don't need another relationship. You don't need the next big thing. You don't need someone or something or someplace else. You need to invest yourself in building a deep and beautiful and flourishing life right here. In Psalm chapter 1, it's one of my favorite sections of Scripture. It's one of the first things I memorized when I was a kid. In Psalm 1, verse 1, it says this. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers," or the scornful is the way that I memorized it. "But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night." And here's the payoff. "He will be like a tree planted by streams of water that brings forth fruit in its season, and its leaf doesn't wither. In all that he does, he prospers, he flourishes." See, this series is intentionally called Planted and not Producing. Because producing, flourishing, the results, the external, that's what we focus on in our culture. And it's especially true in January. We're all guilty. Lose the weight, invest the money, straighten out your garage, clean out your closet, be better. Ever run into somebody and they're like, "Listen, man, I got this LLC for this business over here, and I'm going to start another one for that business over there, and I think I'm going to flip this house, and then I'm probably going to flip that house over there, and after that I'm probably going to go to school and get my seminary degree because I really want to preach this year, and plus I just got certified as a life coach and kind of doing some counseling and life coaching on the side, and I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to start my physical training business." And you're just like, "What? Like this year?" "Yeah, this year, man. #flourishing. Why? Why do we do that? Because like our culture's fixated on and focused on producing and flourishing, and it's not bad. But here's the thing, you don't produce by focusing on producing. You don't flourish by focusing on flourishing. That actually leads to a rushed and restless and rootless life. But if you will do the work of planting yourself in the right environments, if you'll put down some roots in some good soil, you'll be amazed at what God will actually produce in your life. Because flourishing is the natural byproduct of being planted. That's why so many of the metaphors in the New Testament have to do with horticulture. Jesus in John chapter 14, he said, "I'm the vine, you're the branches. All you got to do is stay connected to me and your life will flourish, it'll thrive. You'll produce all the things that you're so desperate to be and to find and to have." In Galatians, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit, that our lives can produce these things when we're connected to the right source. So I want to challenge you this spring. It's not something you can do right now, but go out this spring or this summer and go find a fruit tree that has a lot of fruit on it, that's really productive, and go up and put your ear to the trunk of the tree and just listen. Guess what you'll hear? Nothing. You'd think, especially with all that fruit, that it'd be grunting and groaning and straining. Apple. But it's not. It's just hanging out, planted, and the flourishing and the fruit just happen. And so back in Jeremiah, God gives them some really practical things to do. So he says things like plant gardens and eat the food that they produce. And for them, that literally meant they needed to plant an actual garden so they could feed themselves. If I could stretch and extract a principle from that, here's what I would say that God would say to us. Take responsibility for developing what you need right where you are. You're responsible for whatever grows in your life and your soul. You work the soil. You plant the seeds. Don't expect somebody else to come along and do that. If you want that in your family, if you want that in your kids, you gotta work that soil. You gotta plant those seeds. And then he says, marry and have children and find spouses for them and multiply. And some of you single people are like, that's what I've been trying to do. It's my favorite verse. It's my verse of the year. And these were literal instructions from God because these people had isolated themselves from everyone. And because they refused to have contact with any of the Babylonians, they were just slowly, generation after generation, dying off. That's why God was like, don't dwindle away. Man, fall in love, get married, marry your kids, have grandkids, be strong. And so I think the principle that I would hit you with this morning is that you got to take relational initiative and build community in your life. Don't wait for somebody to befriend you. You go be a friend. Build out your church family. Connect in a small group. If you're around here, we have this thing called Rooted that actually is designed to help you grow in your faith. Take Rooted. Join a team. There's some of us in our church, you've been here a while, you're technically in a small group, but you're really not because you hardly ever go. You're not actually in that soil. You're not actually planted there. And then we do that in all these different areas of our lives where we're just sort of skimming the surface and we're part of this and we're doing that over there and we're kind of there. But it feels like something's missing. But by the way, trees are both what's called gravitropic and phototropic. They grow in two directions at once, and you know this, right? They grow down into the earth because of gravity, and they grow up towards the sky because of the light. But it's one that makes the other possible. See, it's all the upward and outward growth that gets all the pub. Nobody takes pictures of roots. Look at the root system on this tree. No, we take pictures of the branches and the flowers and the leaves and the fruit. The fruit gets all the shine, but it's the roots that actually make the life and the growth and the strength and the stability and the health and the fruit possible. If you will stop focusing on the fruit system of your life and start focusing on the root system of your life would change. Because church, and when it comes to your relationship with God and your connection here, church was never meant to just be a service that you attend. It was meant to be a soil that you are planted in. And so this is what we do, right? This is our lives. And we're doing great. Look at it. I mean, the dirt's a little dry because I purposely didn't water it. But then we start going, you know what? Look at how plain my life is. It's just this plastic little pot. I want to go over here. Oh, that one's, look at the big one. Woo! Oh, I'm going to just jump over here. What if I went to this church? What if we could just live over there? If we could just move here? And this is what we do. That's what we do. Is it not? That's what we do in our life. We just got to get over to that thing. And that's really pretty. And oh, look, it's so shiny. And look, it's got an opportunity. And we just jump around and we don't realize it. But we've given ourselves emotional, relational, and spiritual root shock. And we're like, I just don't know why I can't find what I'm looking for. But if you will put down roots and you'll stay planted even in a plain little plastic pot, good and beautiful and strong and healthy and vibrant and nourishing and fulfilling and flourishing things will begin to grow in your life. And you will begin to grow, even if your situation is a crappy one. After all, manure makes things grow. See, the enemy of your soul, he doesn't need to destroy you. He just needs to keep you from planting yourself in the good that God has for you in your life. And so, man, if there's one thing I could say to you this morning, whether this is your church or you're just a guest here and you're trying to figure out what that's going to look like, or you're going to visit some other churches or whatever, I just would encourage you, as somebody who loves and cares about your soul, commit. Wherever it is, dig in, work the soil of your life, put down some roots, lean into that place. Find a church that makes your soul come alive, that you can jump in and build community, and you don't feel like they're trying to take your resources. You're like, man, I want to be a part of what this church is doing. Invest in a community, connect with the people there, build the community that you need, choose to serve and give and stay planted because you need it. And just watch how your life and your family and your faith will come alive and begin to flourish in ways that you never thought possible. See, the truth is, you will feel fully connected wherever it is that you're firmly planted. And so if you have a place where you're just like, I don't know, we've been around there for a bit and I just don't really feel super connected, are you planted? I mean, it seems so obvious. I feel even silly, feel silly to even say that to you, but it's true. And so that means that you're going to have to make some choices, right? Because we can't be planted everywhere. We want to be, we think we can be. We've been conditioned and told in our culture, we can, we're Americans. We can plant wherever we want. But that's not how you're wired. That's not how life works. You can't be and do and have it all. You got to make some choices. You can't flourish by trying harder to flourish. You have to plant your life in something good. And so my question for you this morning, and normally we get to the end and I kind of give you these assignments, but I just want, this is the question that I want you to wrestle with. Is what does this mean for you in your life? More specifically, what would it look like for you in your life to be planted? If this is your church, for you to be planted here this year. What does that mean for you? What are the soils? What's the good that you've just kind of been resisting? Because it's just not, I don't know, I don't really feel, I'm not in the vibe, I don't really want to be, but you're here. Wherever that here is, you're there. What would it look like for you to plant yourself there? By the way, a few verses after God said all of those things in Jeremiah 29 to those people, he said everybody's favorite verse in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a hope and a future. And those words are powerful, and they are beautiful, and they are life-giving, and they are true. But the context for them is exactly what we're talking about today. Because the plans that God has for you aren't necessarily your plans. The hope and the future that he has for you, it all starts with you being planted, even when you're in the middle of a hard place, even when you're in the middle of a time and season where it just feels like everything's dying, even when you're in a place where you don't necessarily want to be or you didn't choose to be. It begins with you going, only me can plant my roots here. Nobody else can do this for me. I've got to root myself. I've got to plant myself in something good. Let's pray together.